Let's take R out for a test drive, shall we? This is what R looks like. The bright white box that you see right here is called the R console, and that is where all the activity takes place when we work with R, in that R console. Now I have R version 4.0.3, Bunny Wunny's Freakout, installed on my machine, as I can see by reading the first line in the R console. Every time you install a new version of R, it is installed without deleting the previous version of R. Let me show you. So here are the directories within my program files directories, and you can see that the previous version I had installed was 3.6.3 until I installed this more recent version of 4.0.3. Why does R do that? There's a very good reason. One of the downsides of having a collaboration among thousands of individuals who write packages for R is that any time R is updated by the core team, they may do something that results in one of those packages not running. So suppose a package does not run in R 4.0.3 that used to run in R 3.6.3. Until the author of the package gets the package updated, which the R core team encourages all contributors to do to keep track of their updates and to make sure the package runs under the update. Until that happens, however, if I need to use that package, I can still call up R 3.6.3 and run it instead of 4.0.3. So that is the workaround. The fact that we have so many people contributing does have some downside. I consider it a very minor downside in return for the benefits you get for that. And I appreciate that there's a workaround. If I have a package that doesn't run under one version, I can just use an older version. If that older version is not installed on my machine, you can actually go to the archive, the CRAN, the Comprehensive R Archival Network, and you can find that older version of R, install it, and it doesn't hurt anything that's already there because it installs it as a separate installation of R. Now going back to the console here is going to actually be like a big calculator, except that not only can we put in things that we can put in on a 4-function calculator, like 2 plus 3, and get out an answer like 5, but we can also draw on hundreds and thousands of functions that are available to us within R. So the first function I'm going to show you is the function getWD, and whenever we type in a function, we follow it by parentheses. Now, often inside those parentheses, we're going to need to put in what are called arguments. I will teach you more in more detail about functions later on in the course, but right now, since we're typing it in and you might wonder what those parentheses are, that's what they're for. They're for us to feed the function some information. Well, the getWD function doesn't need us to feed it in any information, but we still need the parentheses. What getWD stands for is Get Working Directory. The reason that's so vitally important when you're working with R is because R assumes that any time you ask for any file, that file is present in the working directory. So in my case, you can see what my directory is, that is the working directory in R. R is expecting all files that I call up, that I read data from, anything that has functions in it that I'm going to use, that they're all in that working directory. If they're not there, that is probably the most common source of error messages that people get in R. Now I can change the working directory fairly easily If I pull down on the File menu, there's a Change Directory option right here. So if I click on Change Directory and say I want to go to my R Projects folder, which is right here, and say I want to go to the folder that I created before meeting with you here online called My First R Script, I can do that and then click OK. And now if I type in git wd, now you can see that I have a new working directory. It's in a special folder that I created called My First R Script, and that is where all the files are expected to be that I work with while I'm in this R, what we call session. This is a particular session in R. If I was in another session working on some different project, I'd probably switch my working directory to that folder. We're going to see that RStudio makes this all a whole lot easier. But for those who have used R and RStudio in the past and always wondered why it was so important to create projects, if you went through the introductory videos, you know how to create those projects. The reason it's so important is because RStudio's projects actually will change the working directory within R to be where the project is located. But we can do it manually the way you saw me do it right here. Now let's look at our first script. In fact, let's create our first script. A script is just a collection of commands to R. I have so far given R 3 commands: 2 plus 3, get the working directory, and get the working directory again. Suppose I had a series of commands that I might want to repeat over and over and over. Maybe it's an analysis that I do, and I do it on a regular basis, and I don't want to have to manually type in those commands every time. So what we can do to avoid that is to create a text file that has in it what we call a script, which is simply a series of commands for R. Let's create our first script. To do that, I'm going to pull down the File menu again, but this time I'm going to choose New Script. And what comes up is the R editor allowing me to type in my commands. Once I have those commands in the script, I can then feed them to R, and I don't have to retype them in. I can feed them in over and over again if I wish. Let's create our first script together. You should have your R pulled up right now, and you should work with me. There is a tradition for every single language in which you learn how to program that language, and that is you always start by using the Hello World script. Now it's going to look different in different languages. We're going to do the R version of it, but we're going to follow with programming convention and create the Hello World script. So I'm going to create an object that I'm going to call my variable, and I'm going to put in my variable. We're going to learn all of this in much more detail later, but right now, just follow along with me. I am assigning to my variable Hello World, and then I want to print what is in my variable. Now at this point, I could save this script. Let me go ahead and save it and make sure that I'm in the correct directory. You can see here I'm in My First R Script, so I am. I'm going to call this Hello World, and notice the extension is a .r extension. R scripts have .r extensions. I'm going to save that. I'm going to close this, and now I'm going to open it again. File, Open Script, click on Hello World, and there it is. Now I haven't actually run it yet. I just stored those commands, but I would like to get it from here into the console window. Could I copy and paste? Yes, I could. But an easier way is to go to Edit and then click on Run All. And it ran. Let's close this out and look at it. My variable, hello world, print my variable, and there it is, hello world. You have just created your first R program, the Hello World program. Now behind the scenes, in its memory, R is maintaining what it calls a workspace. And we just put something in the workspace. If I type in ls as a function, let me do that now, we can see everything that is in the workspace. And right now we have one object in the workspace called my variable. If at any time I print that object, or type in rather that object, I can see what it contains, and it contains hello world. Now let's say I want to quit R. So I'm going to say quit, and it asks me, do I want to save the workspace image? If I say no, the next time I start R, it will start with a blank slate. But if I say yes, I'm going to go ahead and say yes and then restart R to show you. Now I've restarted R, and if I look at the objects, I'll find out that there's nothing there. But if I go to File, I have an option to load the workspace, and then if I go to my working directory, which was in R projects, my first R script, there's a .r data file there, and if I open that and now look at the objects, I will see my variable is there, and if I type in my variable, hello world pops up. So everything that was in memory can be saved in that R data file that we saw. It turns out, as I'll explain later when we start talking about RStudio, that I never save the workspace. In fact, I have my RStudio set up so that it will not even ask me the question. It just won't save it. Why? Because I can actually load everything within my project. We'll talk about that more with RStudio, which will be our next stop. We are not going to be using R by itself in this course. I wanted you to have a chance to see it. We're going to be using R, but we're going to be using it in conjunction with RStudio. So the interface we'll be looking at is not the one you see right now, but rather the RStudio interface, and the R console that we're seeing right now will be in one of 4 panes in the RStudio interface. Nonetheless, I didn't want you to finish an entire semester with R and have someone ask you, what does R look like? And have you say, I don't know, I've never seen it. So now you have. You've seen just a couple rudimentary things that we've done. We could stay within R and do everything, but it's going to be so much easier to use RStudio. So let's go there as our next stop.